In the world of AI agents, every time a new framework appears, the same question keeps coming back. Which one should we choose? OpenAI Agents SDK, Claude Agent SDK, AutoGen, and LangGraph. New technologies continue to emerge, and their features and performance are constantly being compared. But is the most important question really which framework is better? In fact, the question itself may be causing us to overlook what truly matters. In this video, we'll explore the fundamental role of agent frameworks and discuss what cannot be understood simply by comparing them. We often find ourselves asking questions like these: which is better, OpenAI or Claude? If we had to choose between AutoGen and LangGraph, which one should we adopt? Or perhaps, can a single framework solve every problem? However, there is a fundamental problem with these questions. Each framework was originally designed to solve a different set of challenges. Comparing language models is not the same as designing agent systems, and building an enterprise system is an entirely different challenge from simply selecting a framework. In other words, the question itself is flawed. So before going any further, let's first clarify the actual role of agent frameworks. So, what exactly is an agent framework? An agent framework is an execution platform that manages how AI agents operate. An agent first analyzes a task and develops a plan. It then calls the necessary tools and, when appropriate, delegates specific tasks to other agents before generating the final result. This process requires a wide range of capabilities, including task delegation, iterative tool execution, workflow orchestration, state management, and monitoring. In other words, the essence of an agent framework is to coordinate multiple agents and tools in order to execute tasks efficiently. Now, let's take a closer look at some specific frameworks. The first framework we'll look at is the OpenAI Agents SDK. The OpenAI Agents SDK is a framework that enables developers to build AI agents with a relatively simple architecture. When a user submits a request, the agent determines the necessary actions and generates a response by calling external tools as needed. One of the framework's key strengths is that it provides essential capabilities such as tool calling, handoffs, and API integration as built-in features. As a result, it is particularly well-suited for systems with clearly defined business workflows, such as sales support, FAQ systems, and customer service applications. In short, the OpenAI Agents SDK is an agent framework that emphasizes simplicity and practical usability. Now, let's take a look at a framework designed to handle more complex tasks. Next, let's look at the Claude Agent SDK. One of the defining features of the Claude Agent SDK is its agent loop, a mechanism that allows agents to repeatedly reason through problems as they work toward a solution. Instead of simply calling a tool and returning an answer, the agent can execute code, read and write files, and preserve information gathered during the process as part of its working context. By continuously refining its approach through multiple iterations, the agent can tackle more sophisticated tasks. As a result, the framework is particularly well-suited for advanced use cases such as data analysis, document processing, and source code generation. In other words, the Claude Agent SDK is designed to emphasize an agent's ability to solve problems through exploration and iterative reasoning. However, when problems become even more complex, a single agent is often no longer enough. This is where AutoGen comes into the picture. The defining characteristic of AutoGen is that multiple agents collaborate by communicating with one another. Each agent takes on a different role, shares information with other agents, and works together toward a common goal. This approach is based on the concept of the actor model. Agents exchange messages, divide responsibilities autonomously, and execute tasks in parallel. As a result, AutoGen is particularly well-suited for distributed systems and large-scale multi-agent environments. Rather than enhancing the capabilities of a single agent, AutoGen focuses on solving more complex problems through the coordination of multiple agents. However, as the number of agents increases, new challenges begin to emerge. One answer to these challenges is LangGraph. Unlike frameworks that focus primarily on communication between agents, LangGraph places greater emphasis on managing the flow of an entire workflow. A process moves step by step, transitioning from state A to state B, and then to state C at each stage. The system preserves its current state and determines the next action based on predefined conditions. For example, if a validation step is successful, the analysis can continue. On the other hand, if a problem is detected, the workflow can be redirected to a human review process. The ability to design these conditional workflows with a high degree of flexibility is one of LangGraph's greatest strengths. As a result, it is particularly well suited for complex business processes and enterprise systems that require validation and approval. In other words, LangGraph is a framework designed to build entire systems around state management and workflow orchestration. So far, we've looked at 4 different frameworks, and one important fact has started to become clear: OpenAI, Claude, AutoGen, and LangGraph. Comparing these frameworks based solely on performance doesn't provide much value. That's because each of them is built on a completely different design philosophy. The OpenAI Agents SDK is designed around the agent itself. The Claude Agent SDK emphasizes the effective use of context and knowledge. AutoGen is built around collaboration among multiple agents, and LangGraph focuses on constructing systems through state management and workflow orchestration. In other words, performance is not what we should be comparing. What truly matters is understanding the role each framework plays and the scope of responsibility it is designed to handle. And once we begin looking at these frameworks from that perspective, we can start to see the real structure of enterprise AI systems. In real-world enterprise systems, it's rare for a single framework to handle everything. What's far more important is combining the strengths of different frameworks. The OpenAI Agents SDK can be responsible for tool calling. The Claude Agent SDK can handle file operations and advanced context processing. AutoGen can coordinate collaboration among multiple agents, and LangGraph can manage the state of the overall workflow. By clearly defining these roles, organizations can build enterprise AI systems that are both more flexible and more practical. In other words, integration, not competition, is the perspective that truly matters. However, even then, there are still problems that frameworks alone cannot solve. At this point, let's shift our perspective. Even if we combine multiple frameworks, that alone is still not enough. The real question is this: who makes the decisions? Who authorizes execution? Who is accountable when something goes wrong? And who audits the decision-making and execution process? The truth is that existing agent frameworks do not provide clear answers to these questions. And as AI becomes more sophisticated and increasingly capable of acting autonomously, these questions become even more important. That's because managing agents and managing an organization are fundamentally different challenges. Agent frameworks excel at enhancing capabilities. They enable systems to make smarter decisions, execute tasks more efficiently, and achieve more advanced levels of automation. In other words, they are designed to improve capability, execution, automation, and intelligence. However, when it comes to running an organization, those capabilities alone are not enough. Organizations require accountability. Someone must be responsible for the outcome. They also require authorization. Someone must have the authority to approve execution. In addition, concepts such as governance and responsibility are essential. At this point, the most important question is no longer which framework we should choose. The real question is this: who is responsible for what? The challenge of the AI era is not simply how to operate agents. The real challenge is how to design organizations in which humans and AI can work together effectively. And that is the true theme that will define the future of enterprise AI.